I am still very optimistic when it comes to quant. I'm not giving up, but some people out there with the price looking the way it is as of right now, even though nothing I say is financial advice, they want me to talk about the idea of maybe quant, let's say, go into the price of $1,000. But then I feel like that's a little bit hypothetically too low, so I'm going to talk about $2,000, even though 5,000 is still in my mind. But even besides that point, I think quant, as of right now, it's being affected by a lot of things. The market sentiment in general, of course, when it comes to altcoins, it's not doing the best. But I think fundamentally, nothing bad really happened to it. We have to think about how Quant as a project, I think, is very solid. I mean, yes, there's a lot of competitors out there for many layer one blockchains out there. There's many competitors out there for NFT projects, blockchain gaming. But when it comes to Quant, it feels so unique because even though it's not necessarily the most interesting or coolest project of all time, I think it brings a very unique approach because if we take a look at the Quant network, made up of the Overledger OS and the Overledger network. Now, the Overledger network, it's made up of the Overledger OS users. So I'm going to kind of skip that process and just straight up talk about the Overledger OS because I think that is kind of the main thing that people focus on. We have to think about this, right? The Overledger OS allows something called a multi-chain application to be built, an application that is built on top of multiple blockchains instead of just one. This is amazing because traditionally people usually have to be stuck building on only just one blockchain, which I guess hasn't really been bad because a lot of, applications out there arguably are still pretty good despite that, right? But then it doesn't mean that it can't be improved because, for instance, through the Overledger OS, let's say I want to build an application that takes advantage of the speed of the Stellar blockchain, which we all know is very famous, again, Stellar aka XLM, but even besides that, we take a look at something like, let's say, Bitcoin, which is known for its rock solid, security, allegedly, and reliability due to its proof of work nature. So again, imagine I can build an application on the Overledger OS that takes advantage of the speed of Stellar and the security Bitcoin. That could be amazing. But then the thing is, adoption isn't the best as of right now, but I get it. It's going to take quite a while. But I think during a fully fledged type of hypothetical altcoin season, we've kind of seen Quant do pretty good, historically speaking. There's no guarantees it could do good moving forward, but at least it kind of has shown that, this kind of narrative has worked somewhat before in the past. Now, some people out there like to argue and say, okay, there's too many competitors as of right now when it comes to Quant. Yes, that is true in theory because there is more, meme coins and whatnot because there is a bunch of launch pads and then it's so easy for people to just launch random projects and whatnot. But then many of them are not really that viable in my opinion. Like many of them I don't think can really rival Quant in terms of the use case and kind of like the fundamentals, if that makes sense. So yes, there's more competitors, but how many of them are actually, quote unquote, viable to actually compete, if that makes sense? Like, how many of them will gain attention? How many of them will actually make it to these big exchanges? We just don't know. But I think when it comes to Quant, at least it's proven, right? It's proven that it's been through the times. I get it. Hasn't been doing the best. Some people like to say, oh, take a look at, Bitcoin, despite the pullback. They say it's doing pretty fantastic compared to not too long ago, and they're kind of complaining when it comes to Quant. I get the pullback. But then imagine if, let's say, the space did pick up again. I think something like Quant, hypothetically, I don't see why it won't go along with the ride. I mean, it's done it in the past. There's no guarantees about the future, but at least that's my perspective. So yes, again, there's more competitors, but I think it's kind of rare to find something that even comes close to the fundamentals of Quant. And we have to think about how, I get it, when it comes to NFTs, it's kind of like left behind back in 2021, some people would argue, but in my opinion, at least Quant is trying to kind of change the way people take a look at NFTs and maybe kind of improve it for the future. Let me explain why, in theory and hypothetically, this could maybe be the case. It's because usually when we take a look at NFTs out there, usually they use ERC 721. Again, Ethereum's ERC 721. I guess there's nothing wrong with that, but we have to take a look at why QRC 721, which is Quant's NFT standard. I think this could really bring maybe much better advantages because through QRC 721, allegedly, things become very interoperable. Now, what does this even mean, right? Let me explain, just very briefly. If we take a look at how there's many blockchains out there, many networks, because many of them are, independent of one another, they cannot freely send data and value to each other, meaning that in that sense, they do lack interoperability. So again, having interoperability, I think, is a big bonus, right? I think it's key for not only the growth of just just other projects out there, but I think especially in the case of NFTs, I think it could hypothetically help a lot. So I think that when it comes to QRC 721, arguably, it could be viewed as you know what, hypothetically being better than ERC 721. Doesn't mean that it's going to have better adoption because, of course, Ethereum is massive. I mean, there's no like telling, if anything can ever really defeat it when it comes to these like, Solana or like BNB chain type of projects. But then, in my opinion, at least I think the advantages that QRC 721 could maybe offer could especially be maybe advantageous in the world of enterprise adoption because for the retail side of things, maybe people might not care that much because take a look back in 2021. It's not like, they cared too much about ERC 721. It did very well, back then. I'm not saying right now, but I'm saying again, historically, at a certain point, it did do pretty good, arguably. But then again, I think when it comes to Quant, it's more so geared towards like the enterprise side of things. So I think this could matter if, let's say, enterprises do want to adopt NFTs on a large scale. We just don't know. Not to mention, some people out there like to say that, oh, Bitcoin is so amazing and all this. I'm totally aware of the fact that it's the largest project out there that we have as of right now. But then we have to take a look at that when it comes to Bitcoin, even if, let's say, right, it goes to the price of 300 grand, that's around a 3x from here. I don't know that, when it comes to something like that, why that would be too appetizing to me. I'm not guaranteeing anything because I can't tell the future, but we have to take a look at Quant because it is an altcoin because the market cap is way lower. Hypothetically, doing a 3x might not be that difficult if that makes sense. Now, of course, it's going to be very dependent on how the market does overall, but let's say the market does do good. I just kind of don't see why Quant, let's say hypothetically, won't be able to, let's say, recover. Who knows, but only time will tell. Now, let's say Quant were to go to the price of $2,000. The market cap at that point, considering current circulating supply, would be around $24 billion, and it's around a 22x from here. Keep in mind, that market cap right there, we've seen Dogecoin pretty much exceed this by around $60 billion in terms of market cap back in 2021. So I think that, if anything, kind of puts into perspective that, this doesn't seem that outlandish. Now, again, some people wanted me to talk about this. I'm going to talk about it. But even besides that, I do want to talk about how when it comes to, the altcoin season, that some people like to say, oh, it's done, there's no more altcoin season. In theory, I just kind of feel like even if, let's say, the markets are doing so good, at least based off history, this might not hypothetically even be a time yet when altcoins are supposed to peak anyways. Let me explain why. Because usually altcoins, as a worst case scenario, they peak around 18 months after a Bitcoin halving event. We're not 18 months removed from the last Bitcoin halving event. We're over a year removed, but we're not 18 months because the last one happened in April, so we had 18 months on top of that. That's October this year. Now, could this date be prolonged? Maybe, because each cycle is going to be different. So then, even if, let's say, I just base it off that October date, let's say I don't even consider like maybe extending it or whatever, let's say in a make-believe scenario. Would right now even be a time yet based off history that altcoins are supposed to peak as a worst case scenario? In theory, arguably, I would say no. So then why would I be like worried? I get it in the short term. Maybe things might not be looking good for the portfolio, at least personally in my perspective. However, to me, there's only one thing I can control, and that is myself. Just believing in the projects that I do believe in, dollar cost averaging, holding and just waiting, literally that's it. I mean, beyond that, I can't control anything. However, even beyond that, let's take a look at Charles Hoskinson, founder of Cardano, co-founder of Ethereum. Back in November last year, he said anywhere from 1 or 2 years from then, he could very well see Bitcoin reaching anywhere between $250,000 all the way up to $500,000. Now, granted, when he said that back then, arguably, the market sentiment was different. But then, in my opinion, at least he's a very reputable individual. Not saying he's going to be correct because who knows, I don't know if he's going to be correct, right? Because how can he tell the future? That's just my point of view, right? But when someone as reputable as Charles says something like that, I'll at least listen. Now, there's no guarantees, but at least I'm going to still stay patient because I have no need to kind of like be worried because the way I take a look at it is that I treat this as like a marathon anyways. So I treat it more so as like a constant accumulation over an extended period of time as opposed to day trading or swing trading because that's not what I do. I just like to stay patient, but again, I'm still very bullish on Quant. And again, if let's say hypothetically the markets do pick up, Quant is definitely something that I'm going to still pay attention to because I like the fundamentals. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I'd greatly appreciate it. It's been Lee the Captain, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.